Everybody, this video is about solving a polynomial equation using the form of a quadratic, whatever that means. So let's consider this problem. We want to find all of the zeros of this fourth degree polynomial. So we jump right in and we write a polynomial equation, 5x to the fourth minus 14x squared minus 3 equals 0. And then you might be stuck because, well, you don't know how to factor this. Luckily, you're taking pre-calculus and you just learned some techniques for finding zeros. You can use the rational zeros theorem, Descartes' rule of signs, and then synthetic division to hopefully find a couple of the zeros. And if you try that on this problem, it won't work. This particular problem is said to be in the form of a quadratic. Now what that means is once you have some experience with this, you'll be looking at that problem and what you really see is 5a squared, choose any letter you want, 5a squared minus 14a minus 3 equals 0. And this equation can be solved by factoring. And exactly the same factoring pattern works for this fourth degree polynomial. What you want to look for in the form of a quadratic is basically we have exponent 2, and then we have half of that, exponent 1, and then we have a constant term. Well, that's what you're looking at here. You have exponent 4, you have half of that, 2, and then you have a constant term. So let's see how the factoring works. Let's just set up our two big set of parentheses equals 0. Normally, let's say this was 5x squared, like we kind of see over here. We're thinking about it as if it was 5a squared. Well, you would want to write 5x times 1x. That would give you 5x squared. But we have a fourth power. There you go. 5x squared times 1x squared is 5x to the fourth. Okay. What about the last two blanks? Well, to fill these in when you're just factoring quadratics, we're multiplying to get negative 3. How about you try negative 3 and positive 1? So think back to how you learned to factor. The way you would check to see if that's correct is you would test the inside two terms. 1 times x squared is x squared. And you would test the outside two terms. 5x squared times negative 3 is negative 15x squared. Well, when you combine these, x squared minus 15x squared, you get negative 14x squared. That's exactly what we have in the middle. So, without really knowing how, with just using something we've learned in the past, we were able to factor this fourth degree polynomial. And now continue just like you would with a quadratic. Take the first factor, set it equal to 0. Take the second factor, set that equal to 0, and solve these two equations. I think these will be pretty straightforward. Divide by 5, so you have x squared equals negative 1/5. Here we're ready to take the square root. Just remember, when you take a square root, it's plus or minus. So we're going to have a small issue over here. When you take the square root, you have plus or minus. Now we're taking the square root of a negative, so I'm going to go ahead and write that as I. And in the denominator, we have the square root of 5. Well, you learned at some point that we don't like square roots in the denominator of a fraction, so you'll want to rationalize that. Multiply by the square root of 5 in the top and bottom. So the two zeros that you get from that factor are plus or minus I square root 5 over 5. And there you go. Here are two of our zeros. Here are the other two zeros, and we're done. So don't forget this technique of looking for the form of a quadratic. It's really powerful. See you next time.